I thought my career, just like any good German, and sorry for being stereotypical, but you know, you go to school, you get married, you buy a house, you plant a tree, you raise your kids, and you die. I thought that was what I'm going to do at some point in time, and for some reason, school didn't stick to me very well. Where I had to give up 50% of my pay of what I was making as a very junior employee in Dublin to move to the Philippines. So my thought was like, okay, you move to different places, you get paid more, right? You move up in roles, you get paid more. No, I got paid significantly less. In order to sustain my lifestyle, I had to take out some stocks, just perform really well. And what I've also seen is like most people, they don't fail from a lack of ambition. When they fail, that's from a lack of rhythm or clarity.
Hello team, and welcome to the start of a new quarter. I'm guessing as leaders, you probably know what it feels like to be overwhelmed in your position, whether it's through complexity, competing demands, the weight of expectations, perhaps even doing it all without the level of authority to act. What's interesting is some people seem to move through that chaos with a sense of confidence, creating order without controlling everything, being able to clarify what matters. They don't just seem to manage teams, they shape the environment where people know what's expected, how to contribute, and why it all matters. So in today's conversation, it's about how that kind of leadership is built, not through title or force, but through rhythm, intention, even consistency. It's about designing systems that scale, yes, but it's also about staying grounded in the human side of work, even when the stakes are high and the distances, as you'll hear shortly, are quite vast. It's about leading with clarity, not with control. Is probably my final lead into this conversation with our guests. So please help me to welcome a leader who lives this balance, Willy Kuhne. Willy, welcome to the ET project. Nice to be able to finally connect.
Very excited to be here and talk about leadership, and also nice to meet your audience, though I cannot see them, but hello, nice to be here.
Yeah, you're sitting over in Lisbon at the moment. How is the weather? I have to start with the pleasantries. How's the weather in Lisbon?
The weather in Lisbon, I would say, never disappoints. This is probably one of big the big pluses of living here. But if you wonder why I live here because it's a perfect intersection of my family and me coming from Europe, and my beautiful wife who is from Ecuador. And so for us, this is like a central point where we can connect into the world and have a little bit of a better weather than we would have in Germany. In Ecuador, I don't know. Ecuador is pretty comparable.
Well, I mean, on that point, you've lived and worked across multiple continents, right? From Germany, you spent time studying in the US at some stage, I believe, or at least with the universities in the US. You spent time in Canada and the Philippines. Now you're in Portugal, Ecuador, of course. What is it about the global mobile type of lifestyle that appeals to you the most?
That's a good question. I think I grew up in East Germany, coming out of East Germany, turning into Germany, and of course I was very little. So a lot of the stuff that my grandparents and my parents talk about as they experienced life, I didn't experience that way, but I saw a lot of change, a lot of Western culture that all of a sudden swamped into Germany, into the eastern part of Germany, where there was a restaurant, there was a McDonald's, and so you could see an early globalization that I just sort of grew up with, though tucked away in some Eastern German city. And initially, I thought my career, just like any good German, and sorry for being stereotypical, but you know, you go to school, you get married, you buy a house, you plant a tree, you raise your kids, and you die. I thought that was what I'm going to do at some point in time, and for some reason, school didn't stick to me very well. So my mom is a teacher in elementary school, and she wanted to make sure that my grades were good. My grades were not that good, and I couldn't really get them up. I would always figure out if I do the bare minimum, I can get the bare minimum passing result. But that also led to some struggles in some other school topics. And so ultimately, I was on the brink of failing in 9th grade. And a friend of mine asked, "Hey, do you want to go on exchange in the US?" And I was like, "Sounds like a brilliant idea. I don't speak any English. I don't know what to do. Let's do it." And it was like this leap of faith, like somebody patting me on the back, "Let's do it. You're unhappy here. Your school is failing. You likely have to repeat 10th grade. Chemistry, Latin, English, all in shambles." And so I went for an exchange and went to the US and had to learn how to adapt and build. That was the first time. It's like if you go into the gym and you have never done pull-ups, and it's the first time you're trying to do a pull-up. By the time you can do one, there's a lot of work that you have to do to strengthen that muscle. And for me, that was the first time I experienced that in the US. And ultimately, I think I got really good at that because I moved across different places in the world and I knew exactly how to build that muscle every single time from experience. In the US, I stayed much longer though. I did and just to intersect one more time, I did a neat stunt back in the day where I was supposed to go home after my 1 year and be an exchange student. And you know how it is. You in high school, I enjoyed the practicality of the school system. You would go have calculus math, then you would go to TV production, then you would go to a gym class. But that was not the gym that I had in Germany where you need to do gymnastics and jump over stuff. No, I had like a weightlifting class in high school. And I was like, this is amazing. And my brain is being activated in different compartments and I love it. And then I also found my first girlfriend there. So ultimately I was like, this is great, I'm gonna stay. And so I transferred all my grades from Germany and did the stunt of doing my 12th grades and finishing high school in the US. Staying with my host family at that time, who I cannot thank enough for what they did, how they helped me. This is something that I will never forget. And hopefully I get to repay to someone else in the future. But yeah, so it was a very different journey. And in 12th grade, I was sitting in 9th grade English as a senior. And I was the tallest and the most advanced and oldest in the 9th grade class. And everybody around me in America was like, what is this guy doing in my 9th grade English class? And I was like, yes, I'm learning. Good times.
How has the experience, I mean, if we put it all together, we talk about all the different locations and different markets, how has that influenced your leadership style over the years?
So this is the first big bucket, because I think in order to do these moves and to do these moves consistently, meaning driving them into a place where you succeed in a different place and you live abroad, you know the drill. I think you have to have a huge amount of self-awareness, and you have to have certain standards that you obey. And I want to talk about the standard of consistency, which is the framework that I use to run and drive high performance in sales teams. First pillar of that is what I call standards. And that means you have to know yourself, you have to know your team, you have to have certain standards that you live by, be clear on your values. And an experience like that really shapes it, because initially the biggest battle you have when you move somewhere is the battle with yourself. Initially it's the honeymoon phase. I really love it here. What a fantastic experience. And then 3 or 4 months kick in and be like, crap, I'm stuck here for a while. So I need to figure that out. So that battle begins, and it's a moment of self-reflection. Then you mingle with people, you build networks. This is also part of building teams, getting more peeps. And then ultimately you have to be very clear on your own standards and values that you bring into that new experience, and that for you are non-negotiable.
Well, we'll dive deeper into that, because I really enjoyed understanding more about this whole three layer or 3 pillar concept. So I want to explore that a little bit more shortly, but I can't let you off the hook yet, because I need to talk about you've got a retreat, or you co-founded a retreat in Canada. So I'd love to know a little bit more about all of that, if you don't mind.
So that came much later in my journey throughout the world. But when we landed many years later, this was in 2018, I landed in Canada with Google at that time too, to be a partner lead for our media and entertainment industry. So I used to have the beautiful job of working with Walt Disney, Warner Brothers, Sony Pictures. We were part of the team that supported the marketing efforts for the release of the Lion King remake and or the live action movie, I should say. Otherwise, I get slapped on my hands. So that's how we moved to Canada for. It was an amazing job, amazing people in the industry, had a fantastic time. But the job was high pace. Media and entertainment is extremely high pace. And so it would not be unusual that on a Friday, when in a lot of other verticals and jobs, people are winding down at 6, you would get a ticketing request that would say, hey, my movie is not, or my advertisement is not running on YouTube because it has a little bit of blood splatter here and blood splatter there. And obviously that is against policy violations. So you would have to go into the internal ticketing system, argue with people, be like, hey, in the US, this trailer is running. Why is it not running in Canada? And by the time you were done, it was like 8:30. And then on Monday, you would need to reevaluate what did the marketing efforts that we had, did they benefit the studios, did it drive success? So it was, and you do that for 80 to 85, 86 movies a year. That starts to drag at some point in time. So my wife's brother was a huge inspiration for that retreat that we built, because he does it as his core job, and he has, from the distance you can see that if you run a small Airbnb boutique hotel business, you can be very successful with that. He has done an amazing job at building a strong brand. He has a core vision, but he marries a lot of the things that also I enjoy, which is the entire brand building. And so we decided, okay, we have, from our careers, we're fortunate enough, we have spare cash left over. We want to invest that. I can dump it all in the stock market and hope for good returns, or we build something that aligns also with our values. And so we wanted to build a place where we can slow down and retreat. So we bought a little bit of land back in the Canadian woods, and we wanted to build a modern shaped cabin for ourselves. And so we designed it, built it through COVID, lots of headaches. And just before we could enjoy it, I got a job offer to move to Portugal. And so we had to do a full not 360, you called it 180. We had to do a full 180. Not abandon the project, but we moved over here and we partnered with an amazing property management company out in Canada and turned it into a hospitality retreat where we want people and guests who go there to feel the hospitality, to feel the serenity, to feel the slow aspect of life as we want it for ourselves. And that has, knock on wood, resonated very well to this day. So this is a little bit of the story of how that came to be. But it came from the idea of, so later we'll talk about this pyramid, right? But if you think about the last bit with this, the idea of sharpening and building a learning culture and having standards, all of that combined kind of falls into that too, because the standard for me was, okay, I don't value hustle culture very much as an individual. Mm-hmm. So I need the counter of that, which is a place to slow down and unwind so that I can also give my best at work and figure out how do I build a place to retreat. And so it's sharpening a completely different muscle. We don't often talk about wellness and mental health as self-development, but I do think it is a part also of self-development to understand when to slow down, when to retreat. And this is where this came into motion.
Well, was there a moment in your journey, whether it was the Philippines, Canada, in the US, or even where you are now, was there a moment where you truly became a leader, or you feel is a leader? Not because of the title, but because of how others responded to you?
Yeah, and I think that was the foundational piece for that for me was in the Philippines. So I'll take you and the audience just a little bit on the journey to understand how that came to be and how that shaped me as a leader. when I started at Google in 2013, I started at the second lowest level in the company. So Google has a level system, level 1 to level 9. And I started as a level 2 account strategist. My hope was to one day get promoted, and I would call my career at Google very successful. This was my low ambition starting out at Google. I was like, this is great. Because you have to understand, I never thought I would work at Google. I never thought I thought I needed the Yale degree, the Stanford degree to make that happen. Turns out my Utah Valley University degree was enough, and my sales experience was enough. So I got a job as an account strategist and worked my way up throughout the 2 years, and actually did get that promotion. And Google's a company where you shape your career proactively. So you don't wait for someone to be like, Willy, you've done a fantastic job. I think you should go to the Philippines and you can do even better there. No, that doesn't happen. What happens is you go into an internal job board and you decide, okay, this seems like an opportunity I want to pursue. You apply internally, you tell your story, you mesmerize in the interviews, and you get that job. So it's like a job interview within the company. So it's not that it's not like that much of a given. You have to fight for that and have to build your narrative in order to get that done. And so I was just promoted, just came back from a trip to Bali with my friends. And I was like, I've never been to Asia. It was my first exposure in Asia. I went to Bali. I was like, whole Asia must be like this. So completely blind to the world. And decided I need to go and experience more of that part of the world. And so that was the door opening. Right. And I found a job that was the agency lead. So you have to understand, I'm a senior account strategist, and I'm applying for a role that is an agency lead role for Group M. So if you're familiar with the global agency network, Group M is an agency under WPP, one of the larger agency, or the largest agency network. I actually don't know right now in the world. And they had an opening for an agency lead in Pakistan, serviced out of Singapore. And I was like, what an adventure of a lifetime. This is going to be my journey of a lifetime before I one day settled back in Europe. And I applied for it. And for some reason, at that stage in Google, we were still expanding heavily in APAC. They wanted me for the interview. I was like, wow, I just got promoted. I'm here for an interview, agency lead Pakistan, serviced out of Singapore. Final round with the agency director of APAC. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar role. I don't think that person would speak to me as an L3 anymore, but back in the day that somehow happened. And the person was like, yeah, look, I appreciate your ambition. I appreciate your proactivity. I don't think that role is for you. It's like, okay, end of story. Try again. Got very far, but didn't work out. And then a couple of days later, I get a message again from the agency director. I was like, okay, but I like the way that you interviewed. I like your philosophy and your idea. I may have something for you where you fit. And it was like, there's a role that has been in the Philippines. It's vacant for 18 months. And we need to build an agency team that services all of our agency relationships and sales that we have, so that we can unlock customer impact and client success. And I was like, all right, let's interview. Interviews went well, got offered the job. When I saw the pay of the job, I was like, and this is also a really good lesson, I was like, I had to give up 50% of my pay of what I was making as a very junior employee in Dublin to move to the Philippines. So my thought was like, okay, you move to different places, you get paid more, right? You move up in roles, you get paid more. No, I got paid significantly less. In order to sustain my lifestyle, I had to take out some stocks. But it's one of those pieces in my life where I'm like, you take 2 or 3 steps backward and it will catapult you forward. And at that time was my hope, but I took that risk. And in the Philippines, instead of just being an agency lead, as there was no one, I needed to step up and be the head of agency for the entire country, reporting to the country manager of the Philippines at that time. And I needed to build relationships with every C-level, make sure that we put systems intact, structure intact. And then I remembered back in over my career and moving into different places what has served me well. And so this is where slowly but surely the system that we're talking about came to be, where, okay, cool, pyramid level 1. Am I clear on my standards? Standards, what are my standards? I want to communicate proactively. I want to make sure that when I go out to the customer, I give them the very best of the company and the very best of myself. Number three, I want to make sure that I keep developing myself and my team. And on number four, I want to make sure that I have a growth mindset, but also remain adaptable to the situation, because I have no idea where I am and what am I supposed to do.
Right.
Part one of the standards. Part two of the standards, who am I? Well, I'm Willy. I'm a outspoken, positive leader. I think the glass is half full, not half empty. I hopefully bring a lot of excitement and charisma to my conversations, and I want to make sure that all the agencies at the end, when I'm done with this, are my friends. That's who I am. And number three is big blind spot at that time. Who are the agency C-levels? I never met them. So I need to meet them. I need to build that relationship. Let's move sales aside. Let's focus on who are you? How have you come into this position? What do you value in life? How are your kids? How's your family? And how can I help you best? And so that was the baseline. I was figuring out how to build that relationship with the people, reached out to some agency C-levels on LinkedIn and made sure that we introduced ourselves and built a relationship. All right, part one. Part two was new to me because I'm a very junior employee at that time, swimming in the deep end of the pool. Part two is, how do you instill structure? The objective is really, you go into the Philippines, you create that relationship, and you grow the business fast. It's not like they sent me there for free. Obviously, there is an intention there where we grow Google's influence of the advertising spend in the industry. So I needed to figure out, okay, the structure that we have is, we have no one in the role for 18 months. So pretty easy to build structure, but you got to do it systematically, meaning got to create some rhythm, frequent meetings with the agency C-levels, frequent meetings with key personnel of those agencies, account directors, and so on. You got to build a rhythm of communication, newsletters that you have to put into place, and make sure that you have certain activation dates that are very clear. When do you go into deal negotiations? When do you want to close those deals? And how do you communicate this? How do you bring stakeholders? Very early on, you need to put that structure into place, which takes time, because for my opinion, I can know myself, I can know my standards, but if I don't know the other people, I don't know what best structure suits them. So that's why it was really important to get that right on the standard level, so then to build the structure on top. Okay, now I'm done with this. The long story is, there's still one part of the pyramid missing. The long story is, that really shaped me as a leader, because I went from being told what to do to running an entire program by myself that was extremely high stakes, and we needed to negotiate for the market in the Philippines, pretty high stakes deals at that time, that I know how to do, but at Google at that point in time, I haven't done. No.
What was your age at that time when you first took on the job?
So I started Google quite early, at the age of 23, not the earliest, but I hustled through, I'm not a fan of hustle culture, but yet I hustled through university and I hustled through my master's, mainly because in the US I did the trimester thing. I didn't take summer off. I wanted to make sure, I didn't have much money, so I needed to make sure that I benefit of the in-state tuition cost as a out-of-state or foreign student during the summer. And so I did that, and then I was able to tag my master on it. And so I started at Google at 23. And in the Philippines, I negotiated with really experienced veterans of the industry there at the age of 26.
Wow. Very, very interesting journey up to that point. I mean, there's so many things that I'm hearing along the way as you're developing your leadership style. So you're talking about self-awareness, you're talking about social awareness, working with other people, you're talking about putting processes, systems, structure in place. For somebody young in leadership, this may sound logical for an old person like myself, but for a younger person, this is not so much, or not so readily learnable. Did you have any mentors, or was there a process that you were following somewhere in the background? How did you get these insights in the first place?
Yeah, I have been exposed to extremely strong leaders. I haven't had much mentorship in my life in that sense, but been exposed to strong leaders, and you could compare it to mentorship, but when you're in a junior role and your boss is the country manager of a market and you have one-on-ones, that does feel like a sense of mentorship, even though those one-on-ones are performance and business related. You do pick up ideas and pieces. The second bit is the company invested a lot in us. So if you think then on this last bit of the pyramid, this idea of sharpening, I was fortunate enough that Google invested a lot into my personal development and in my personal learning. And so sharpening, I always refer to as building a culture of learning. And I worked in teams that are psychologically safe. And I'm throwing a lot of business lingo in here, but this benefits a lot because you are able to transparently exchange ideas and grow with each other, while at the same time the company invests with you. So all of that kind of trickles down. And throughout my career, I had leaders who are very good in one of those pyramid pieces that I've talked about. And I had one leader, which is in my role now, who unfortunately left our team, who was really good in all three of those things at the same time. And you start tying it together. Everybody has probably a different philosophy, a different framework. I would argue that most of you who are listening to this podcast follow this pyramid in one way or another. You may call it differently, or it's pillars or whatever, but I think good leaders are self-aware. I think good leaders know how to build structure, and good leaders care for their team, which is the idea of, can I help you develop? And throughout the career, that I've seen that everywhere in my job, and this is something that I'm grateful for, and I'm also very grateful for Google that obviously they invested heavily into our self-development and self-awareness.
And the pyramid, I call it the 3S pyramid. So yeah. I don't know if you have a title for it, but the 3 S's, so standards, structure, and then sharpening. Does this then help you provide the consistency as a leader to enable the performance of the high-performing teams? Is that how the whole process works?
Yeah. So this helps me go back and now dissect performance of sales teams. So I can go back and okay, we are, I'm just making this up, but you are 10 percentage points behind targets. I've seen that this was the same case last quarter. Is that a standard problem? Are people unclear? What is the basic expectation in the job? Are people unclear who you are as a leader? Are you an authentic leader, or are you just sitting there telling people what to do? Or are you sitting there and telling people what to do, but people like that and they follow that? That's also fine. It's not about judging the leadership style of the framework, just making sure that, are you clear in the standards, and are the people clear, and can they follow you in whatever standard you have set?
Right.
Number one, if that is okay, check the box, let's move on. Are there issues in the structure? Typically, yes, you find issues in the structure. There's breakdowns of communication. There is withholding of information. So there's nothing cascades transparently. In the beginning of my career at Google, I had leaders who everything was cascaded from the top down, nothing was filtered, and everything landed on my table. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Or I was like, can you pull this data? Can you pull this data? And everything was like, Willy, you do it. I don't know if that's the best. So how communication flows, how the rhythm of the business flows. Do we have regular team meetings? What do we discuss in those team meetings? Am I hiring the right people? Am I onboarding the people? All of that stuff falls into structure for me. And if you build that out, you can likely find issues where we are having performance gaps, for example, where these performance gaps can come from. And so you can start addressing that within the structure, which is easier to do. Structure is always easier to fix, in my opinion, than standards, because standards, you have to change people's perception and their awareness and what they think of themselves. As a longer process and much more painful, and you need really good feedback culture, in my opinion, to get that done. Structure is easier to fix. So if it's not a standard issue, that's good. And then the last bit, you can dissect and do we have a culture of learning? Are people developing? Are we giving people space to grow, or are we withholding people? Can also obviously drive performance gaps. And then what also falls for me into sharpening is the idea of, I was alluding to this earlier, but psychological safety. And so if teams are not psychologically safe, obviously it then breaks down the entire pyramid as well. So it's a tool for me to dissect and look at where are the issues, but also vice versa. I don't like to just look at issues all the time. When teams doing really well, it's like, which part of this, I know this pyramid is working, but which part of this is working really well? And what are you doing as a leader within that pyramid that like set you apart from everybody else? And that's also really interesting part.
So I'm visualizing it as you're talking about it, and I can imagine within the confines of a organizational structure, I can see how this would work very nicely, right? So you provide that framework. How do you then deal with the ambiguity that comes in with more complexity as you broaden your leadership focus? So I know in your case now you're based in Lisbon, but your focus is quite broad. So how do you maintain that 3-layer approach when you have this very complex network that you have to manage? Does that create extra challenge?
Yeah, of course. It becomes more complex, but I typically don't shy away from the pyramid. So now when I talk with senior leaders, now I have directors that I talk to that manage team leads, that manage sellers, and that do that more across different markets and different programs that I manage for Google. So I utilize this framework still very much at the same level in those interactions to make sure, like, look, this is not working for you, and I try to figure out, okay, it seems like we have an issue here in part of the, I don't know, onboarding, or we have an issue in how we derive insights, communicate insights so that we can make them actionable, also part within the structure. I can still use it to dissect that performance, and then I can look at it, which is also interesting. I can then zoom out and look still through the lens of the 3 S's and the macro lens of the organization, right? So I can say organizationally, yes, we have markets that are doing better than others, or programs that are doing better than others, but overall, I think people are clear on the standards that we drive here. We can improve some of the structural elements that we have here. For example, how we communicate equally, transparently, and standardized across teams. Maybe there's an opportunity there. And I generally see that we have a strong culture where people actually want to develop and grow. Overall, I think we're moving in the right place. A couple of things we want to improve. And then you zoom back in and be like, okay, these are the markets actually where, or the cluster directors I have to work with. Right. Where we have some of those fundamental challenges. So I use it to zoom in, zoom out, but I don't shy away from the 3 S. That is my go-to.
Got it. I can imagine one of the challenges that comes up, and I know this is something we've spoken about before, but influence without authority. That's a title as such, but within that context of what you just mentioned, I'm guessing that you don't have direct authority over many of the people that you're having to influence. How do you cope with that, and how do you deal with that? And does the 3 S pyramid still stand fast?
Yeah, it becomes more of a consulting conversation, to be honest. So no, there's no authority there. No, I manage for us our outsourcing arm and our vendor operations. So I can't go, and I don't want to go to our partners and be like, you need to do this and that and that. I think that will get me huge slaps on the wrists, co-employment issues, and the whole deal. So we don't go there. But it becomes more of a conversation. So the 3 S's still very much apply to that, whether you build your own team, whether you run your own team as I've done in the past, or you're leading with out authority. It's like, look, what do you think about the standards that we run in the organization? What do you think works well? What do you think does not run well? Open-ended questions that lead to answers. and that lead to discussion points. But you need, for those conversations to be effective, even if you're leading without authority, is a high amount of psychological safety. If you go in and be like, I am your customer, because if we all partner with vendors, I'm essentially the customer that buys that service. You need to do this, and that, and I expect this to be done by tomorrow, and please deliver it. Then that doesn't build psychological safety. That's a customer-vendor relationship, and you expect deliverables. What I want is a conversation. I want to understand what's going well. And I want to understand how I can help you. And if you want to bring me in to help, absolutely. And if you don't want to feel like this is a topic where you want to bring me in, that's also fine. I make sure that everything that I talk about gets translated into this framework of the 3 S's. And I can then, when you talk to me, it's like, we really have like challenges in this aspect. And my brain goes in here, then it gets translated into where does that fit in the 3 S? And then I can do something with that and ask questions. So that's the consistent process that I have for myself.
But what I'm hearing there is you have a considerable sense of clarity around the approach and the framework that you've built, which probably enables you to be more relaxed and more transparent and have that dialogue. Whereas many leaders will go in on the defensive and think, I need this person to do what I need them to do. Why? I'm not sure, but I just need them to work under my guidance. It sounds like you have that inner confidence that with that clarity and you know where we need to get to, you're able to share that with the people you're working with your clients, with your agents, whomever it might be.
Yeah, I am fundamentally convinced that that system works because I've seen it work so many times over the years and seen it work with people that understand in one form or another, but they understand the principles of self-awareness, structure, and the learning culture. If you understand those in principle and you're able to translate your best into that, I've seen teams perform really well. And what I've also seen is like most people, they don't fail from a lack of ambition. When they fail, that's from a lack of rhythm or clarity. And I interpret my job as leader to support teams, managers, directors with as much clarity and infrastructure as I can, give them a system to operate in so that they can shine and deliver their best work. Not to look over their back and be like, what are you doing? Are you doing this right? Are you doing that right? No, I want to give them a system that they can own, run, and execute themselves.
Right. You mentioned a phrase or a term when we first spoke, and I only captured a part of it, so you can expand on it if you don't mind, but stakeholders at scale. It sounds like a very powerful phrase. Can you explain stakeholders at scale?
Yeah. This is essentially my job, manage many stakeholders at scale. You think about the different partners that I work with, vendor partners that I work with. Within the vendors, I have different stakeholders. I have, I'm working with, I have to get my math right, 4 directors, 1 head of business, 11, 12 plus team leads. Then I have internal revenue operations counterparts that I work with. I have product stakeholders that I need to report to. I have people who ask me about what's the customer satisfaction that we're delivering with our operations. So it becomes a massive thing that I can tap into many different stakeholders for something completely different. And it's something also to manage. So how do you manage that? Through clarity. So you go back to what are your own standards? For my sales teams, I want them to work proactively with integrity. I want them to do the right job. I want them to work with customer focus at the heart. And I live by that too, meaning I value integrity. I value proactive communication. I value customer centricity. How do I value customer centricity? Is like, if you need my help, I jump into a call. I want to make sure we get this right with the customer. I'll be there. I lead by example if I have to, no problem. Even though we have a vendor relationship, for example, I can still jump into phone calls. These are still our Google customers. And so I'll be there if I need to be there. Then am I clear on my own structure? Yes. On once a month, I dive into our customer-centric reporting. I make sure that, okay, what is the feedback our customers are saying? I see some red flags. I communicate this proactively to stakeholder A, who manages that, but I also communicate this to stakeholder B and C because they run the business on our vendor side. So you see that the complexity still very much operates within this model of having different stakeholders. You probably don't need that much of a learning culture in the sharpening piece, but you do need also psychological safety with those stakeholders, which you build then through knowing the people and knowing yourself when you go into the meeting. So the whole framework still very much applies to also that, but I don't want to be like, think about this framework day and night. It's also not what I do. It just lives in the back of my head. And I make sure that I hold myself accountable for when I talk with different stakeholders and control my controllables within the means of the framework.
One of the interesting things that's coming up to me in this conversation, and I'm confident many of our listeners are wondering, here's somebody working at Google talking about leadership in a very human-centric way, and we haven't yet introduced technology into the conversation. Given that it's a Google, platform we're talking about. I mean, if we think about technology, whether it's AI or other forms, how much is that part of the leadership role that you're playing, and how much does it influence your people?
Yeah, good question, Wayne. This is the big thing I think all of us leaders need to figure out, how to integrate AI. Look, I think AI is gonna absolutely help us get that done. I think it exists, won't go away. My job is to make sure that we integrate this for our sales teams, our people, and I want to make sure that everyone has equal access to the idea of how do we prompt, how do we use those tools to make our jobs easier. I often will say in the meetings, like, where did you take meeting notes? Use the Gemini function and have Gemini take those meeting notes for you. There's no point in you manually writing this down. This is great that you wrote this long email. Put it into Gemini, condense it. So a lot of the stuff, though, that we do with AI, yes, you can do strategic thinking. Yes, you can build sales plans with AI. It's also what I do. But I think most of the stuff comes down to communication. Right now, it's yes, we can do videos and we can do images and a lot of cool stuff with it. But in the end, also, if you think about ChatGPT and other language models, so they can help us in improving our language and our communication. And this is how I utilize it. Be sharper, be quicker, less time on writing the super complex directory email that needs to be written in a certain way. Just I write my notes and be like, hey, can you put this into a couple paragraphs for me so we can send that out? And I would expect everyone to feel that same autonomy and authority to use the tools the same way that I do them. And if anyone has questions, I'll be more than happy to show them how that works, for example, internally. But I won't shield anybody from the technology. I want you to embrace it and be as good as you can. And hopefully you have enough psychological safety, you have enough of the sharpening mindset that you share what works for you so that we can all grow together.
Do you ever see it getting to a point where it starts to impact leaders' functionality or importance?
Yeah, you have to, as long as we are still able to, a couple of things, strategic thinking, critical thinking, try not to outsource that very much. I think there's a lot of benefit in, like, think yourself. You have so many data points, similar to like AI getting so many data points, but I think the human opinion and the human thought that you can bring into a discussion, and a meaningful discussion, still holds a lot of value. So that's one. And don't outsource your humanness to AI, right? So I think this is why this entire conversation, you can completely scrape the 3 S's if you want to, but for me, if you take stuff out of leadership, it's how you deal with humans. That's what leadership is all about, is bringing humans along on the path and making sure that we together get it done. If you I'm all for AI, and I'm a big fan of it, but I'm also a big believer in the human spirit. So I know there's other leaders out there who think like machines will be better than anything, but look, I'm a human. I'm pro-human. I want everything to be done by humans as much as we can, and so embrace it, but be human with each other.
On that note, I mean, if you think about yourself as a leader and look ahead to the future, do you have that vision of what type of leader you would like to become going forward?
Adapted to what I am now, so growing with technology, of course, but I like to take the ideas and frameworks, and especially leading from this place of self-awareness, human-centric. I think that I like to keep that as a base personally. When that starts to fail, I have to also ask my own values, right? Do I want to be a leader that spits out just what AI tells me? Or do I want a leader that still has strategic thinking, has an opinion for himself, and is able to bring that to his team and have a constructive, psychologically safe discussion with his team? And we can, as humans, drive the business forward, because in the end, we still have to sell to other humans. And I think humans are still really good sellers. We're still good of operating with each other. And so my backbone will be on that. But I will embrace 100% the technology that I have to make my thoughts, my approach, my style of work sharper. For sure, that won't go like that. I also won't negotiate, and I'm not technology blind. Obviously, I work at Google, so I'll be the last one to sit here that I would say that I don't use AI. I'm a heavy AI user, but I'm self-aware enough to know that I am a huge believer, obviously, in human-centric leadership.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting close to the end of our time, but if you could leave the audience with one, let's say, leadership principle, maybe not the right word, but one sort of guidance about something you've learned through your experience, and you were talking to some younger leaders, is there one thing that you would leave with them that you would recommend they try and embody?
Yeah, I think if you want to drive consistency, you want to drive high performance, you have to start with yourself. That's for me as a leader, that's a starting point. It's very easy to get sucked into the day-to-day of business. So what I can encourage everyone to do is spend some time with yourself, with who you are. Do a Gallup Strength Finder assessment, do a discovery assessment. Just try to figure out what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what can you work on. Sounds very basic, but trust me, I know so many people who get pulled into leadership positions, they find themselves there overnight, that had never had the time to figure out who they are. Maybe they have a conversation, but they don't use data points and stuff to discuss that. I think that's a crucial point to start. And once you understand who you are and you have the self-awareness to reflect on that in engagements that you have, one-on-ones, team meetings, and you see what works and what doesn't work, you can start to slowly build structure on top of that, and ultimately figure out how to build psychological safety and develop your team. But I'm a firm believer that it starts with yourself. And here's a fun bit, because we talked about AI, you can also use AI to ask questions about yourself and do a little bit of introspective work versus paying a bunch of tools to do that. So it could also be a good starting point, but start somewhere. And I think that somewhere has to be with yourself.
I'm smiling to myself, Willy, because as a coach, I mean, this is the type of advice we also give to young leaders starting out, is to become self-aware as you can, implement or use that self-regulation with that awareness, and then reflect based on the experiences, reflect on how that went, what went well, what didn't go so well, what can you change, what can you improve. So I think very sound advice. Thank you. Are you happy for people to connect with you and continue the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I write a little bit on Substack, and I also I copy paste my articles on Medium. So please don't sue me for this, but there's only that much unique content I can write. And most of the stuff that I talk about, you can find on my channel. So I have a website called Wiku, stands for my name, Willy Kuhne, so WIKU.studio. And if you want to connect, you can connect with me there.
All right. Well, we'll link to that. Really fascinating conversation. Always intrigued to speak with leaders and understand how they put into practice a lot of the theories. In your case, the theory is through your own experience, and you've kind of developed that into a 3S pyramid. So it's very, very interesting to work through that, and I look forward to staying in contact and understanding more about the journey. And thanks for being on the program.
Thank you for having me, and yeah, looking forward to getting in touch. It was a pleasure talking to you, Wayne.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.